Hey, we are live. Hello and welcome to Community Manager Live. I'm David Dewald, Community Manager at Siena. Each week we bring a collection of community professionals together to discuss a topic selected by you, our audience, or suggested by you, our audience. If you would like to chat along with us today, you can do so on YouTube, where we can pull your questions in and comments right into the stream and show it on screen. If you prefer to just watch or listen, you can do so on Twitter, where most people will find it. You can find the links to all that is on CMGR Live, or cmgr.live.com, not .com. I'm just a mess today. You can find all that on cmgr.live. I'm all over the place today. Yeah, I should hope I'm good. And there we go. So we'll go around the horn real quick, all three of us. And we'll start with Vinia. Introduce yourself. Tell us who you are and what you do and where you do it.
Yeah. So my name is Samantha Venia Logan. I do go by Venia, and I run a community consultancy and e-course learning platform all about learning how to build online communities using social scientific methods. And it's called Socially Constructed Online.
Jillian.
That sounds so cool. My name is Jillian Benbow. I'm the Director of Community Experience at SPI Media. And I have a podcast called the Community Experience Podcast.
Very good. All right. So today's topic is escaping me right this moment because I am totally unprepared. Managing community conflicts and controversies, such as your host not being ready when he starts his show, could be a conflict. So
I'll take that as like, if that's the conflict that happens, like, sounds good.
That's the easiest one. Right?
I'll level with you. Like, we're coming up on the holidays. You got the Santa hat on.
I'm taking it off because it's hot
a little bit, right?
Well, you know, we always wanted this show to be more natural and less formal. And that intro that I do is so formal that I never get it right. And it's written down and it scrolls across the screen for me really slow and easy. And I still mess it up.
So maybe messing it up is a blessing in disguise then. Like,
well,
you want it to be more like typical, like, you know, that thing where it's like social media doesn't care if you have typos in your tweet.
Yeah. And like, they don't care if your microphone's on screen. So yeah, they just don't.
99% of YouTubers have a microphone on screen. So
I know. What's up with that? And, you know, Jillian's got the headphones on. We don't care. It's just the way it is. It's always been designed to be more casual and a relaxed setting. It's really supposed to be a discussion. We do ask questions. Sometimes we go off topic. Sometimes I pull us back on topic. Sometimes we just run with the topic because I think it's more interesting. We do convert this over to a podcast if anybody's interested, and you can find that just about everywhere under Community Manager Live. So if you want an audio only feed, that's the way to pick that up. All right. So if we wanted to go with the questions, talking about conflict and stuff like that, let's see, what's a good question to start with? Okay, so let's just do it this way. You've discovered a controversy or conflict that exists in your community. What steps do you take to assess what's happening so that you can figure out how to address it or what to do?
Can I do the thing I'm known for?
Sure.
Applying a theory.
Yes.
So for those who are familiar with the socially constructed kind of zeitgeist area, I'm very, very big on communication, sociology, and anthropology theories. So when it comes to disagreements or malcontent in your community, I think it works best to break it up in the same way that you would communicative conflict, wherein if you look at a couple in a relationship and you look at the frustrations that they tend to experience, there are like 4 general buckets that you can use to mentally position yourself to ask, how do I want to respond? And it's kind of like those 9th grade Punnett squares that you tend to do, just like, which bucket is this, right? So the first one is the severity of the emotion. How emotionally invested are they? And then the second axis that you want to talk about is whether or not the argument or the content of their argument is very, very simplistic or very complex. So if you have a complex, visceral argument, a complex, visceral issue where it's just like, I've been with your company for 20 years and I just don't understand why every single time I call into your support, you're doing this, right? And it's genuinely really complex content, but it's a super, super visceral response. And then you have the simplistic version of that, where it is highly emotional, highly visceral, but it is very, very simple in its content. And then you have the two other Punnett squares, where it's very disorganized and very, very high level, or very disorganized, but very emotionally invested. And then once you've got those buckets where it's like, yes, this is really high levels of content where we can take feedback from it, but it's also highly emotional. You can now say, hey, sounds like we need to take this off of the comment. Do you think that it would be okay if I sent you an email, or maybe we could have a private conversation about this? Do you think that we could help this? Or you can do the good old mute and boot, because there's nothing involved in it. It's not good content. And also it's highly emotionally damaging.
You saved it at the end. I was going to say I just ban people. No. I don't. I totally agree with that. I think that sometimes I'll ask probing questions that make them rethink what they're saying, or that's my thing. As I like to ask questions. It's like, why are you so angry about this? If it's really, if they're really over the top, it's like, hey.
Yeah, but sometimes that's a bad response too, because if you come at them and say, we don't understand why you're mad, that just makes them angrier.
Yeah. I mean, I'm of the mind that, the people that are the angriest and the loudest are really on your side. They want things to be better. If it's customer feedback, if it's infighting between two users, that's when I think that it's appropriate to say, hey, maybe, are you guys, why are you arguing about this? What's going on here? It's okay to disagree. You don't have to, you can let this go. I've often, I hate to do it, but I hate to use be the bigger man speech, but I'll do it especially on users that are in the community that have been there for a long time, that are normally excellent community members, and somebody just pushed all their buttons. I will go in and say, hey, look, I know this is unusual for you, and I know they got on your nerves, but I'm asking you this time, just let it go. Just let them have you don't have to reply. You don't have to do anything. Just let this one go. And I see it. I see what they've done, and we'll keep an eye on them. And if they continue to instigate, we'll take steps to take care of it. And sometimes that'll work to diffuse a situation. But I'm not above. I'm one of those people that I will lock a conversation so that it can no longer continue. That in platforms where you can do that easily, sometimes there's not a way to just stop a conversation. But that has always been kind of my go-to move. It's like, if you go too far off topic, or if you go too hostile, I'll pop in and say, okay, we need to take a break, and I'll lock the conversation, and then nobody can reply. And then that gets them into more self-policing. When they start to see things going sideways, they'll be like, hey, other people will jump in and say, hey, we like the rest of this discussion. We don't care about your little fight. Calm it down so we can keep talking over here. And they'll kind of come in and help self-police, but that could lead to other problems as well.
I think it depends what's going on, right? Like anything in community, it depends. If it's people that are angry about something to do with the brand or the community you represent, like that's one thing, right? And I think, Vinia, you had some great examples about that. And I think a lot of the time with those people, it's coming from a place of loyalty and then frustration, because they feel that somehow that loyalty is being either taken advantage of or overlooked or whatever it is. And sometimes just being willing to hop on a call and let them just, at you, and you kind of, as the community manager, you're kind of the face of the company. So you let them unload on you and you ask questions, and with the ultimate goal of like them feeling heard and acknowledged, right? I always want people to feel like I hear them. And even if there's nothing I can do about it. And then from whatever is within that diatribe of what they needed to say, there's usually something there that I can kind of figure out and see, okay, here's the issue, right? Like, this is what it is. And whether that's something I can then escalate to the larger team that I'm working with, the larger brand, or even if, and it depends what it is, right? So some stuff, it's like, hey, there's this pretty valid concern. Let's talk about it. Is there anything we can do? And what does that look like? Or if it's something that's absolutely just, not going to happen. It's like, hey, just so you know, this is a feeling that's happening in the community. We need to change our messaging so that people understand that that's just not going to, right? But then like the community fights, which I'm really fortunate right now because I work for a company where our communities are paid. So it's like a different environment. So the fighting is not like many of the communities I've managed in the past where it was just wild and exhausting. But I have through those wild and exhausting communities, I kind of came up with a process. I mean, first it's guidelines and setting expectations, right? Like here's what this community is about. Your First Amendment does not apply here. Is not a political. We're not talking about, government criticisms or whatever. So that doesn't apply. Most common mistake is from humans. So, you're engaging under the expectation that you're following the guidelines. So then if people fight or there's a problem, you have that in your back pocket to be like, hey, I'm shutting this down because of this guideline. Let me know if you want to talk about it or if you don't understand, right? And so then they're kind of like, eh. And sometimes people are like, well, I don't think that's what that guideline meant, and that's where, if it's valid, it's like, well, maybe we should add some context to this guideline. But also I think it's that, talk to everybody in the situation, get everyone's side. If this is like a big thing, right? Not a, like you lock it and it simmers down. Like if people are like going at it, I like to, again, it's the, I hear you, I see you, talk to everybody, then come back to everybody and not necessarily say like, hey, you did something wrong, or like, oh my gosh, so guess what? Actually, it was all David's fault. So you're good. And, like you don't gossip or anything. You just say like, this has been resolved. You need to trust me in that. And then we all move on. So that just maintaining that high trust with everybody, even if someone is totally in the wrong, but being professional with them. Right. And then I feel like it's a learning experience. And David, to your point, then the community will start modeling those behaviors, because if they're in one of those experiences, they see how you dealt with it. And then another experience happens. They know what's going to happen. They know what to expect. So they'll jump in and say like, hey, and that's where like the magic is.
Hi, Michelle.
Hey, Michelle.
Hello.
Hey, Michelle. Everybody knows Michelle. Michelle is part of guild.co. Welcome. Glad to have you. So we'll say hello there. And to your point, it probably was my fault.
Yeah. I mean,
you weren't even there. It was your fault anyway.
Yeah. Yes,
exactly. You just make it so easy, David.
You are now officially our hashtag Blame Obama.
Oh, thanks. Thanks for that.
I do think it's interesting because in all three of our responses, there is this underlying trend of, one, rely on back-end policy to basically say, hey, we've hashed this out already. And also using tools in order to have that discussion at scale so that the community can enforce itself over time. Yeah. I think that those are really, really crucial infrastructural elements to making sure that conflicts are resolved regularly.
Yeah, definitely model the behavior you want to see. And, I've been doing this for a long time, and even I make mistakes when I do this. I mean, I did just like a week ago. There's one of the fan communities that I'm in and that I run, and I handled a situation kind of weird. It's hard to explain how it was, but it was the user did a weird thing. They're a good user in the community, and they're normally a very good contributor. And they put something into the community in a weird way, and I pulled it, and then in my response to that, I kind of said, don't do it that way, do it this way. And it didn't translate well to them. And there was a back and forth in a thread. And, at the end of that, I'm like, hey, if anybody's been watching this play out in the thing, I don't have a problem with the user. The user is normally a very good contributor. I just have an issue with the way that they did this one thing this one time. And, you should check them out because what they do is good. They're a content creator, and they had shared something in a funny way that they had never done before. And it played out in the discussion of, why did you remove this? And I'm like, this is why I removed it. And, and it kind of just played out publicly. But at the end, I handled it wrong. And that was 2 weeks ago. And my first community was in 1998. You'd think I'd have it right by now. but
We all
we're
mess up.
human. Yeah.
but it was a situation I'd never encountered before, done in a weird way, and I removed it in a weird way. And so, mistakes can be made, and the community can take umbrage, and you just have to, but the easiest part of that is like, fess up. I messed up. I did it wrong.
Yeah.
So
Well, that
this is on
maintains
me, not on
trust.
you. Yeah.
Yeah. Like,
So-
because
I was talking with.
Go ahead.
What? Look at us, conflict resolutions. I was talking with Adrian yesterday about this, and Adrian runs Higher Logic and ran Vanilla Forums, and like, he's kind of a juggernaut in the space. And he was just then saying, like, yeah, even the most seasoned of us mess up because, like, we don't know what we're doing here. We just have a slightly better idea what may work better.
Yeah.
And I think that that's a really important part, especially when it comes to conflict and making sure that you have proper standard operating procedures for handling the general things, but also maintaining and approaching empathy when those cornerstone cases you couldn't possibly think of occur.
Yeah. And that ties into rules, because when you define rules, there's going to be edge cases to everything. We saw that when Facebook was banning breastfeeding pictures. It's like their first policy said no, then their next policy said in this instance, and then they've had to extend it. Okay, what about this statue of David or this fine art piece? Okay, maybe we will let nudity in some cases. And you get all these edge cases. Yeah. So to that end, you can define rules, but I think you have to be careful of over defining them, because then you'll get people that'll come in and just look for holes. Yeah. So you can be general, but don't be too over specific.
Oh, sorry, Jillian. I also forgot I had interrupted you.
Oh no, you're fine. I was just going to harp on just the trust, how important it is to have trust. And, when we, just to be consistent with, if you are removing thing or locking it or whatever, to tell the person, hey, I've done this and here's why. And here's justification. Here's the community, refer to the guidelines, but also be willing to have an open conversation. I think that goes a long way. And then to David's situation, like, we've all been there. We'll all be there. I've done the same, where I handled something poorly and then was like, and I'm not saying you handled it poorly, but I have handled things poorly. And then
I did.
And then, like, the best way to deal with it, instead of, and just going off behind the keyboard and, disappearing and ignoring it, is just say, hey, look, I handled this a certain way. I realize now I shouldn't have done that. I should have done this. Apologies. If you want to talk about it, I'm here. If not, thanks. Like, I'm human. And it just goes such a long way, I think, with community members, because anytime you get a little too dictatory, right, people are kind of like, well, this is feeling transactional. Like, why am I here? It doesn't feel like real community, right? So It's always a balance, of course.
Well, yeah, because I always say that, community managers are benevolent dictators. Benevolent dictators. I can't talk today. What is this? Benevolent dictators.
Kings and queens of all.
Yes, we are. I mean, but our intention is that we will do things for the good of our audience and our communities. But ultimately, we have to make some hard calls sometimes.
Yeah.
And, that kind of leads into another question I have. But if you have a point to make, Vinia, please step in.
Yeah, like, one of the things that I tend to do, I have a template for how I manage my community guidelines. So we have guidelines that are based off of codes of conduct and stuff like that. And we publish it as a single blog. And we'll publish it as a blog that says, these are the rules. Now here's how we're going to enforce them. And in this whole secondary section, I have that Punnett square broken down of, like, what's the level of emotion and what's the level of content. You're going to get more good faith points for being in this square, right? And then after that, just below it, I have a small explanation where I call it exercising goodwill, in which before a community manager, a facilitator, or an admin chooses to make a decision, I always train who I can to go through this process that I call the good faith process, which is if you're in the first square, which is low content, low emotion, then you get 3 replies to ask for clarification and try and rectify the problem. If you're in the highly emotional but very little content square, then you're going to get 2 attempts where it's going to be like, hey, I totally understand that you're invested in this, but we'd really love to have just a little bit more information to make sure we understand the issue before we move forward to solve it. Then if you're in the bottom square, which is high levels of content but low levels of emotion, it's that kind of point where it's like, all right, we have plenty of information, but what do you want us to actually do about it? So it should usually only be like 1 reply. And if you're in that last square, you're out of chances. Like there's that good faith policy of like high content where you were just flooding the chat with really, really high emotional level. That's one of those things we just cannot have, right? So I always have like this good faith exercise or protocol that is publicly available so that we're not just policing the community's interactions, we're giving the community the expected behavior of the community managers who are running the community.
You always drop the like science bomb on us. You know that, right?
I love it.
Yeah, I've learned I've embraced this aspect of my personality.
Okay, there you go. Yeah, we are so polar opposite in some ways. Like I'm very flying by the seat of my pants. If you can't tell from the way I run this show. And
Molly, I'll actually publish it as a blog later on today. Sorry.
There you go. There you go. So let me ask: Have you ever had a conflict that kind of got out of hand before you even knew about it in the community, one of your communities? She's like, everybody's like, yeah.
Don't
like
launch
Friday.
on Friday.
Yeah, right. Yeah. Friday evening, as you're like having a glass of wine or doing whatever, and then it's somehow you find out it's like, oh, there's a massive fight going down. Of course, hold on.
Yeah. So how do you handle that? What do you do? I mean, I try to say there should be work-life balance in the community manager's life. I'm fortunate. I work in B2B, so there's this time frame where most of the people that use our product are online, and that's when they interact the most, and I get to follow that time frame. But it gets away from you, it gets ahead of you, it spreads like crazy. How do you handle it? What do you do?
I feel like I talked a lot. If you want to go first.
Oh, okay. Yeah, no, you're fine. We're all just so passionate about it. We're like, yeah, it's inevitable. I always joke that like the community never sleeps, right?
Mm-hmm.
So
they don't take vacations. They don't go on holidays.
Precisely.
They just don't.
Like on one hand, it's a sign of a healthy community, right?
Yeah.
It moves on without you, but sometimes it moves into the dark spaces. And I think, going back to the modeling piece, right? Like if you've been modeling good behavior, if your community members, or you at least have a core group of community members who are they're invested, that loyalty is there, they're going to help out a lot. And that's usually how I find out about things like this in off hours, because they will be like, nah, help. And I think it depends what it is, right? Sometimes I think you can go in and just make a statement to be like, hey, knock it off. Like, what are you doing? And sometimes it's just like, all right, this is why I'm salaried, buckle in, and just kind of take some time to nip it in the bud before it gets too out of control, or before damage is done that is not repairable within the relationships in the community. So I think, classic answer, it depends. But I think at least making your presence known and saying like, hey, I think that, just jumping in and commenting in 5 minutes is better than just being like, well, I hope it's all right. And just to say like, hey, I think this is going a little left. Let's remember like why we're here, kind of thing. Just kind of give everyone a chance to breathe. Or, if you need to lock it, you lock it. And sometimes that stuff happens when you are just out, right? And you come Monday morning to the battlefield. And so you kind of have to pick up the pieces. And I think that's, again, it's just establishing goodwill to be like, hey, it looks like something happened. I might be reaching out to people. Just a reminder to everybody, here's our guidelines. Maybe take a minute, and then
she's getting
distracted. Benny's like getting something.
Yeah.
Show and tell time. But yeah, and just like and publicly saying like, we acknowledge this thing happened. We're looking to make sure everyone's good. Again, depending what kind of community is, you may have more of a, focus on, I want to make sure everyone feels safe and supported, or it might just be like hey, I want to make sure nobody was doxxed or, harassed. And just being open about it, being transparent. Because again, it's not, people want to feel a part of things. That's my long-winded answer.
Oh, that's good. That's good.
Yeah. So Michelle asked where the framework may have come from. And yeah, it sounds like we might be pretty close. But I have a book here called Communication Theory Analysis. And in this book is actually a theory. I'm going to try and get the name and then toss it into the chat for you, which is where this theory came from.
All right, very good. Yeah, I apologize. Normally I have a co-host to help me with the chat messages, and it's been very poppy today, which is awesome. So Vinia did say, I'm going to pull this back up, and this is from Molly. Molly, Vinia did say she would link out the rules and explanations in a blog post after. I don't know when. Let's see. Molly, we'll go over to Molly. Where's that one here? Yes, no, Jennifer. Yes, it is recorded. We're actually streaming live to YouTube as well. So you can go over to youtube.com/@symbol CMGR dot, or not dot, CMGR LIVE, CMGR live. And you can find us there, or you can look for Community Manager Live on YouTube. So you can catch it there. So thank you for that. And okay, so you answered Michelle, so I won't pull that one back up.
I got it. It's relational dialectics theory.
Yeah, I'm flying solo today. I usually have a co-host to help. Tim has decided that his grandchildren are more important than me, and while I am upset, I completely understand. No, he's hanging out with his grandkids, so I could not take that away from anybody. I just wouldn't. So we talked a little bit about modeling behaviors in the community and our users stepping in. So I'm going to ask, what happens when they step in and they're self-policing, but they kind of go overboard? How do you handle that? These are people that are normally very good for you, and now they're getting a little harsh in maybe how they're speaking to other people, or just how do you handle that? They're normally good, but they're stepping out of line. You just need to reel them in a little bit.
I've dealt with this many, many times, and it's one of those, it's like, oh, thanks, but, and it's hard because you're like, oh, they care and they're trying to be a part of things. And I think we all know in community, there's those people that are like, me, I want to, help. I want to be a part of this as much as I can. And sometimes that enthusiasm gets a little past what's appropriate. And so it can be really difficult, right? Because you can upset them in a way that they will leave, right? And that's, you don't want that. And so I just think having like gentle conversations with people goes everywhere. So just to be like, hey, I saw that you were helping out in this thing. I appreciate that you wanted to take the time to help with this. I see that you're trying to help. But the way you went about it, you upset this person, or just kind of like whatever the situation is. And just like next time, if you want to just say something vague and then call one of us to come in, like, you don't need to be the bad guy. We'll do it. We're the bad cops. It's fine. Right. And just framing it that way. I think feelings often get hurt no matter what, but it's more important to maintain the level of, hey, you're overstepping, and to not all of a sudden have this like, neighborhood watch that's taken over and making everyone miserable. So uncomfortable conversations, it's a really big part of the job.
Yeah. I feel like from my perspective, like I want to avoid talking to the person who was overly policing if I can, because I want them to continue with that behavior, and reprimanding it might remove that behavior. And in many cases, that uncomfortable conversation is necessary. But if I can avoid it, what I'll do instead is just be like, oh, it looks like there may have been a misunderstanding here. And then I'll talk to the original transgressor, where I'm just like, is this what you meant? And try and reframe it, not as an issue of breaking the rules, but an issue of intention and values. And just be like, this person values this interaction and had this intention. If this is what you were intending, then maybe we can look at a different correction. And you can illustrate in the public situation by bringing up the issue to the original person. You can just show, here's how I would have handled the situation. and then that person hopefully may move forward and do it again. If it happens one or two down the line, I'm definitely shooting a quick message and going, hey, you're a bit overzealous here. We would love to have this conversation with you and kind of walk you through our guidelines in exchange for receiving an actual badge for being a good contributor and going through that training.
Yeah. I love that the video game industry always comes up with nicknames for things. And in this case, the nickname that they have for people like that kind of get in there and maybe are over policing a little bit is they call them mini mods, short for mini moderators. So people that are not quite moderators, and just as a funny aside, in one of the communities that I kind of hang out with, there is a person in the community that's like super helpful, and he's like that. And people will often think that they're a moderator when they're not, and not in a bad way, not like they're being a mini mod and being a pest, but just like, oh, you must be a moderator. So in the community that I was in, I had the ability to kind of assign a label to them. So I put their label as moderator in name only. It's just kind of an in joke. So he had no extra powers at all, no moderation abilities, no ability to edit or, police anything. But
it's
it was just moderator.
Your detective badge.
Yeah, it is. It's like, the little plastic shield, right?
Oh my gosh.
Kind of thing. So yeah, but it's just, you try to make it fun, if you can. But yeah, to that end, when they get a little overly harsh, I think Vinia's way of doing it is better than mine. So I'm not going to talk about it. No, I do roughly the same. I'll come in and just say, I would just, because I would go in and say, okay, end of conversation, and lock it, that's my answer for everything. It's like, okay, we've got resolution before people get too out of hand, that kind of thing. I think I have a question in here that says, have you ever had to ban anybody who instigated conflict? And it's like, did the sun come up this morning?
Yeah. Get out the ban hammer. Here we go.
Day ending and why. I think it was a day ending and why.
I honestly, I genuinely believe this. If you are using the mutant boot overzealously, it is a sign that you need to change your policies.
I agree.
Yeah.
If you are using it so often and with such frequency that you are trying to strong arm a culture into a community using platform setups, something is wrong. So I feel like there's a lot of signs in that water if you're doing it often. Yeah, but I also want to say a lot of beginning community managers tend to cite on this fact when they hear some of us experts going, if you're doing it too much, it's a problem. And then they start doing it not at all. I think that we need to be more frank and more considerate with the fact that a lot of new community managers will listen to these words of like, a good community manager will have it happen less. And in their brain, it's just, oh, so this is basically me being bad at my job, so I'm going to try and not hit that button. And I'm like, no, you need to hit the button. If there's a DEIB issue, you need to hit the button. If your culture is changing because of 1 or 2 or 3 people overzealously interacting, you need to hit the button. So I feel like you need to not be scared to hit that button. It's the sign of a good community manager to have that balance. But for new community managers especially, I just want to say, like, yes, being able to use that button in order to understand the cultural complexities of the community you're building is one thing. But you're not terrible at your job if you have to hit it once or twice or 3 times when the bots start coming in.
Oh, the bots. That's a whole other.
Yeah, I joke about that I'm a blocker and a locker, but the truth of it is that it's a balancing act. If you find yourself doing something over and over again because of something in the community, there's a problem. It's either your behavior or their behavior. So, and just, you might have to step in and say, okay, maybe I'm in the wrong here. Maybe I'm trying to, like you said, force a culture that isn't there. And I think that the best communities are the one where the community decides on the culture. You set some guidelines and say, this is what I don't want to happen. Like, I'm a big guy that I feel like I will police profanity in a community where it just isn't needed. I mean, and I'm a little overzealous in that. And it's not that it's not that I have anything against profanity. I don't think it's offensive or bad or anything. It's just that I don't use it in my day-to-day world. It's just the way I was brought up. And so if you're using it in a way that's attacking somebody, it will get removed. But if you just say, I don't give up, then you're fine. I'm not gonna police that. But I have rules in place that will flag it for me and say, hey, somebody said this word, take a look at it. And it's like, okay, they're not calling somebody else, dumb. They're just saying, I feel dumb, and get some context for it. But I will remove stuff that attacks other people. But that is my little quirk, is that profanity kind of goes through this filter. It still gets published to the community. I don't stop it from going to the community. I just get something that says, hey, come take a look at this, because it's far too often that those words are used to be hurtful to other people. And that's what I don't want to have in the community. I don't care if you're, happy as shit about something, but don't call somebody a shithead. So
that does kind of bring up, there's this amazing project. I met them at All Things Open, the community managers for Drupal, I believe, and Jordana King, I think she works with Mattermost and also with Drupal, and then Melissa Henry, I think. They're doing this amazing project where they have an AI built into the actual chat box as you type a thing. And it actually comes up and it just sends out this warning that says, hey, it looks like you're about to post something that's going to trigger our filters. Wow. Do you think you might want to rephrase this a little bit? Is this really what you meant? And it's kind of like Grammarly, but for community interaction. I think it's really
amazing.
Cool.
Because I'm old and I've been online forever and doing community work forever, I can tell you where that came from.
Really?
Yes.
Tell us the story, David.
I would say our good friend Patrick O'Keefe used to be very big into PHP-BB, and he ran a community for PHP people that could create mods. And one of the mods that he commissioned somebody to write for him was this pre-moderation, and this was 10 years ago, easy. So it's been around a long time, longer than you think. Twitter does it now, where if you start to type something, it'll like, hey, are you sure you want to post this? Because it might sound something. Yeah. So, but he's the one that first kind of postulated it that I'm aware of, and got it online and made it into a tool that community managers could use in their forums. And it would just go through the list and say, hey, we don't like it when you use these words. You need to change them. So Patrick O'Keefe, Community Signal podcast, check him out. He's really good. That's where that came from.
Yeah, I love that. And thank you for being the historian.
I didn't start out being a community historian, but I'm ending up one.
Well, I mean, at this point in time, at some point in time, you'll need to commit your oral history to Word.
Oh,
that would actually be a really interesting book or blog or however you'd want to do it. It's just kind of like these big touch points in the history of community, going from this thing that no one understood to now it's just like most people don't understand it, and soon enough maybe even more people.
In the beginning there was the BOD, and the BOD brought us the BBS.
I want to just reinforce, so just talking about banning people and when to do it and how often, and do you have a ban hammer? Is it out of control? Is it under control, like not doing it enough? And I think, again, just going back, I think having really strong community guidelines, and Vinia, to your point of, you said, I have the same thing. We have our community guidelines, and then right under that is our moderation policies. So if you violate these guidelines, here is what will happen with no uncertainty, with no uncertainty. So, and we say, we will kick you out if you do something horrendous, and that's at our discretion. So it is vague, right? But we also have hey, you didn't know, we'll tell, basically we have a 3 strikes you're out policy, and that works for our community. In the community I'm running now, I've never had to ban anybody. I've thought about it, but I've never actually done it. In past communities I've worked in, there's that, rotating door of bots and trolls and just the whatever. And so those people, and I think you learn with experience, right? You learn that the people who are bad actors, quote unquote, they come in to make trouble. I'm not spending a lot of time with them. The people who maybe just don't have what I like to call digital etiquette, I will work with that person, because they're trying. They just don't understand how to engage on the internet for whatever reason, be it like their generation, be it just their their environment growing up, whatever their how they see the world. Some people are just, they come off really rude online and they don't actually realize it, right? And so I like to give them the benefit of the doubt to a point. But having these policies in place, I think that helps, especially for, as we were talking about earlier, like the more junior community managers, and especially in conflict. Like conflict resolution is hard, and not everybody likes it, and not everybody wants to break up fights and be called names and all those. I mean, I don't want to, but I'm also like, whatever. I'm so used to it. It's like, fine, I'll do it. And so having those guidelines in place and having those policies in place, I think really helps a more junior community manager like calm down and have something to hold on to justify, because sometimes you're like, oh, do I ban them? Ooh. Or you're like, oh, I just banned 20 people. Was that the right call?
I do think it's a good idea. It's a good concept, though. Like banning 20 people in one go definitely is going to have a profound change on your culture. But you shouldn't feel bad for doing it. You should feel bad for having to do so unintentionally.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And there's, I think, as you work in community, and depending on the type of community, I'm sure like video game communities, I'm like, no, thank you. Cause I'm sure that, they get saucy. Right. And it's just the level, and like, I'm down for a good, like, let's fun trolling, if you will. But like, once it crosses the line and you're just like, okay, no, knock it off. And they're like, haha, and it's a lot, it's exhausting. So having anytime you can, and it's boring, right? But like having policies to stand upon is what makes it from like miserable to just kind of annoying, like it's just, you have that gut check. I also think having people to talk to. So if you don't have a team, it's always great to have a team who understands your community. But not all of us have that, or we're doing it solo. So having a community of community builders is also really valid, because sometimes you just need a gut check. And I do this sometimes, and sometimes it's, depending who's on vacation or whatever, because I'm actually at like a company with a community department. I'll just grab someone in our company. I'll be like, okay, here's the situation. I'm going to send you something that happened, and I'm going to send you my response. Am I being a jerk? Like, tell me, what do you think when you read all of this? Because I just need outside perspective, and sometimes you just do, and sometimes you just got to block people. It just depends.
I totally agree with that. Like I have sensed in myself the need to be talked off the cliff. You know what I mean? I literally worked at a very small company. It was a video game company. It was a very small company. I was employee number 3 or 4, 3. And so what I literally was so angry at this one user that I literally called the CEO and said, all right, here's what's going on. Here's what, I want to do. And, and he was like, that might be a bit much, and he kind of talked me back. But, it was just one of those things where it's like, I know I'm right. I know they are very wrong. And I wanted to, there's the ban hammer, and then, there's let's put the whole building on top of them, not just the hammer type deal. And it was, having that ability to talk. And to your point, and I was going to make this point if you didn't, is if you are a solo, or as we used to call it, a lone wolf community manager, talk to another community manager. I don't care if it's your competitor. I don't care, if it's just some random person you pulled up on the internet. I'm all over the place. I'm historian everywhere. Right. Contact me. I will talk you through it. We'll talk through it. Just, I have to understand your policies, what you're trying to do, and what's happening, but we'll talk to it. And even if you just need to vent for 5 minutes, I'm willing to listen to you unload, because we've all been there. So please, any of us on this screen would probably take a tweet message from you and just talk you through it.
I want to hear about your saucy situations in your community. Like I'm all about that. Like send me your fires.
Yeah. Especially when it's someone else's community. Like, yes, because I have no emotional attachment. So it's like, all right, what you got? Tell me everything.
I used to keep what I did is I had a little, when I worked at the video game company, we had 16 million registered users. It was massive. And I had volunteer community managers. And whenever somebody would send in an email telling me how bad I sucked at my job, I would save it. And I had a bulletin board that was private for just my moderators. And I would post it in a forum called Fan Mail. And you just see them. They would call me every name out of the book. You suck at your job. I can do it better. And what's funny in those situations when people say you suck at your job and I can do it better, because I used volunteer moderators, I would say, okay, you're a moderator. Let's see you do better. And they would either quit within a week or they would become the best moderators I've ever had, because they finally get it. They're like, oh, okay, this isn't easy. There's some effort that needs to happen here. There's some, you can't just pop off on somebody because now you're the bad guy, and it's just like, so, that's happened. People that have called me the worst things in the world have made the good moderators. So it just depends. But like I said, if you're ever in a situation where you just can't get your way through it, contact any moderator, and even if you just have to Google one, or community manager, community professional, any community professional, I think would take a 5-minute, 10-minute, 15-minute call with you and just say, what's going on? So please
also
do
go
that.
Outside, walk away.
Yep.
Walk away. Go take a walk. Get some perspective.
One more. I got 2 more questions. This next one's kind of going to throw you, I think. Yeah. So when do you, or should you, choose to ignore a conflict in your community?
When you're principally involved, walk away and go take a walk, just like Jillian said. Like, there are many cases where you do not need to be involved. You should get the community to solve the community's problems.
Good point.
I actually say, like, if it's just a difference of opinion, or if they're handling it, I don't need to be there. Like, I don't want to be viewed as like I just am like, overlording and watching every conversation, and I'm gonna jump in and do stuff that it's not preschool, right?
Yeah.
I try to give people the benefit of the doubt that they can resolve conflict. The exceptions are like if someone's, hate speech or just something really bad that like needs to be dealt with, obviously. But if people are having a civil disagreement, I'm paying attention, but I'm not jumping in unless I'm tagged into it or I see it cross that line, whatever that line might be. It depends,
I also think there are specific levels of interaction that you should be taking. Like, you may not need to get involved with the discussion publicly or say, hey, X person, I'm DMing you, as like a slap on the wrist or anything, but you should still be sending that grapevine communication channel to be like, hey, it looks like something happened here and there's some emotions. So if you want to talk about it, I'm here. Just that nice little DM. No one publicly knew you were involved, but you are making sure that you're taking care of the people who were, I think that's a really, really important skill for a lot of community managers to hone and manage, is how they interact with their community members on the grapevine, not necessarily as an official post.
Yeah. And Tim, who's not here, is a big proponent of having phone calls with your community,
Such a good thing.
Yeah. So, if somebody's, in conflict, you can reach out to them and say, hey, can we have a call? I just want to talk to you, see where your head is, kind of thing. Yeah. And that's a very good way to do it. And it's not something that happens anymore. And nowadays it's so much easier. It's like, hey, throw up a Zoom, meet me on Zoom, come talk to me, or whatever you use. So I guess my last question is not really related to this, but tangentially. Have you ever stayed out of a public discussion outside of your community because of what we do professionally?
Yes.
All the time.
All the time?
Twitter problem. I have not given a comment on the Elon Musk thing at all, despite my position, explicitly because of my position.
I mean, I have in some situations.
I definitely have in the Twitter situation.
Yeah, in the Twitter situation, I have shared some opinions, but it's only in that dumpster fire. Yes.
Oh my God, I want it. Oh, I want
right. Every community manager needs a little dumpster fire.
Well, I think that you know what I will say this about what's going on with Musk in Twitter. That guy is getting a fast track lesson in community management.
He's learning.
He's
on.
failing.
He's got some good days. He's got some bad days, but he is
You're
learning all about what we do and how we do it and why it's not so easy as it looks from the outside as a user.
So vindicating.
So,
Yeah.
but you know, I got to say it's hard because the show is kind of built on top of Twitter in that we do a lot of our outreach there, and it's hard to tell if the outreach is still working as well as it once did, and because some people have left and just shifted, and some people haven't, and I don't know. So I don't know where I am with it yet.
Yeah.
This
So
also
Dave,
isn't our first go around, like
Yeah.
we had it happen with Facebook in 2013. It happened with Reddit in 2016. It happened with Freenode. Virtually all of the Freenode infrastructure completely collapsed the second Alessia was bought. Like, it's not our first go around. And it really is just a virtual diaspora in the same way that we have cultural diasporas around the world. Now we are having them across domains, and it's not abnormal. It also happened with Second Life and with World of Warcraft, with Star Wars, when the servers finally spun down there for like one of their projects. I think that Elon Musk is learning very, very quickly how fragile large infrastructural cultures actually are, and why you can't just start clearing out employees and start clearing out benchmarks and start clearing out rules and expect everyone to behave exactly as they have already.
Yeah, I think that's fair. So, and then and when
Sorry to
people
make you
talk about
it, by the way, you're like,
Huh?
I haven't talked about this, and we're like, well, let's talk about it.
Yeah, sorry about that. I will say this, we have Facebook, Twitter, and everything because the community platforms or the social media networks before them failed, right? So we have a long history of platforms rising up and failing. I can go back quite a ways. I've been around a long time. 6 Degrees led to Friendster. Friendster led to
Gosh, Friendster.
MySpace. MySpace
Throwback.
led to,
AOL,
so
Crystal
we have
City.
that's what I say. We have Facebook and Twitter because MySpace failed. We had MySpace because
Wherever Tom is, I
Friendster.
hope he's doing well.
He's doing quite well. He's on
I'm sure he's
Twitter
fine.
and stuff.
Yeah,
So.
he's fine.
But it's a cycle, and it will continue to cycle. And we have the big guys today, but they might not be the big guys in 2 years anymore. And we as community professionals will adapt and go to what's next. I mean, even within community platforms, if you asked me 5 years ago who would be dominant in the community platform space, I would have said Jive. And Jive no longer exists because it's split in half, sold part of it off to Khoros and the other half off to another company that does intranets for companies. So you just don't know what's going to happen. And that's how it goes. So
yeah, I think it's exciting though.
Yeah, it is. I mean, it's always leaves room for the upstart, right? If something, I mean, Reddit rose because Dig failed. Dig said, all right, you know what we're doing isn't working for us financially. We're going to change everything. and the community said, we're going to Reddit.
Yeah, it's like, speaking of change, bye.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think there's something, all these platforms that are being created, and now you have these like no code solutions to launch a community. And so I think we saw in 2020 this huge boom of kind of the more like entrepreneurial people trying to create small niche communities, and a lot of them failing, which is no surprise, just because it's a skill. Like, building community takes a lot more than I think many people realize. Also some nice vindication, but I like that there's this kind of leveling of the playing field. Like, you don't have to have the funding or know-how to like create a custom thing or, use some WordPress plugin that's going to break. And you can just use one of these platforms and bring your people to it. And I think there's something about that I find very special, especially when you think about just kind of the more like niche groups that maybe don't have a place right now. Hopefully they're not, horrible, but like they're, for good. Like, I think of like peer support or, different groups of people that maybe don't have the representation in their daily lives based on geography and circumstance, and can now create a place for people like them to connect and have that sense of belonging, that it was just harder before. Like, sure, you could do it maybe like a Facebook group or something like that, but that's assuming you wanted to be on Facebook or, whatever it was. So I'm excited about the future of community in the sense that we're creating, I think, like a lot of good things. And I think there's more good to come. And there'll be more dumpster fires too that we can all watch and dissect, but hopefully we're not involved.
Yeah, hopefully it's not our dumpster fire.
Right.
I also feel like there's one element of this conversation that we haven't really touched is building tools. And this is primarily just for communities of scale, but creating tools for community members to self-police themselves has a very storied history of successes and woeful failures. Like, you bring up Reddit, who has the up and down vote system. And then there's also YouTube hiding the dislike button. There's these community facilitation features that have a varying degree of success throughout communities. I'd love to hear more about y'all's opinions on those.
Oh, I have an opinion on the up-down vote thing. Yeah, I have a strong opinion. I think that every down vote on the planet should be eliminated forever because people don't use it like it's intended. Like on Reddit, it's like, oh, how do you use it on Reddit? Are you saying an upvote is I agree with them, or is it I agree, or this is good content? Is the downvote this person sucks? This person opinion's bad? This content is false? You just don't know. There's no context. And it can lead to situations where somebody will go through somebody else's entire stream of posts and downvote everything because they don't like the way that they said something 2 years ago. And they've just made it a habit of going through and downvoting everything. So I think downvotes should just go away. And the upvote can be, I like this or whatever. It's always, we lift up, we don't put down. That's my big thing. So
that's so interesting. But what about like when the downvote is used? I'm just playing devil's advocate. Yeah. When the downvote is used in a way to flag bad,
doesn't you have a flag button for content? All these sites have report buttons.
But don't you think the same person? So you get rid of the downvote, right?
Yeah.
Won't that person that goes and downvotes everything because that's what they do? They'll just go flag everything.
Yeah. But I mean, that's
like
to me the police, because you know that they're reporting it when it's not something that would be reported. Whereas the downvote is ambiguous. Do they just disagree with everything that person says? Or is it this particular piece? Oh, it's easy to justify it. If I've reported it and said it's something it's not, that's pretty actionable. Okay, that is not pornography. So I don't know why you flagged it as pornography, because it is clearly not.
I suppose too, you could, have it set up where if someone's abusing the flagging, then they get timed out, right? So you can kind of teach the behavior.
Yeah, that's true too. That's my strong opinion on upvotes and downvotes.
It's one of those things, right? I mean, I don't disagree with you. I think about this a lot because I'm on Reddit all the time, but as like I'm the stone cold lurker, like to our earlier question, where it's like, do you participate? I'm like, no, I just watch. I don't post. I will upvote, and I will downvote, but for like just when people say really gross or horrible things, I'll downvote it. But I'm not, I'm not going into, I never, it never occurred to me to go to someone's profile and look at all their posts, learn everything you can about them. That's just not my style.
Yeah. But, you're not a troll? Or is that what you're saying?
Yeah, not currently.
Okay. Currently.
No, but I think it's interesting. Just a bigger part of this conversation is how different subreddits have dealt with that. And so am I the asshole is like one of my favorite subreddits where people
it's the most popular one on Reddit this year.
Oh, is it?
It was the number one subreddit.
It's so good.
Also,
I love
it's genuinely good. Like, they've cultivated great content.
Yeah, no, it's great. I mean, some of them are like, this, please be fake. But yes. In every post, it's like, don't downvote the asshole. Right? It's strict instruction because it messes up with the algorithm. And so you're supposed to not do that. You upvote it, if anything, so more people will see it. And then in the comments, then it's, jury, the jury speaks. But then there's a few other ones. There's a few other ones where you can't see the down votes or up votes. Like they disable your ability to see it. So you like get rid of like biasy and whatnot. And so I do think it's interesting in the sense of like giving the people the power, right? And letting subreddits decide. And they like, there's so many different, like each one has its own, it's like different countries in the UN, right? They all have their own rules. It's fascinating.
I moderate communities on Reddit. I have some that I run basically. And
oh my gosh, I'll come troll you.
Oh, yeah, there you go. Historian CM on Reddit. It's Historian CM Community Manager. That's my Reddit username. Okay. I am now going to get trolled.
See that fan hammer.
Yes. And I have, it depends on the community that I have, because I have really kind of two that I run. I used to have three. I gave one up. I have a 30-minute, you can't see the votes, just because some of the stuff that people post is controversial, not in a bad way, but just aesthetically. So maybe somebody, because it's about arcade machines, the home arcade machines, and they'll post something and somebody will think it's beautiful and I'm so proud of this, and then somebody else will come along and just say, oh my God, what a piece of trash. And I want to give that a chance to survive that kind of bump, because they worked hard on it. They put a lot of time, effort into it. And I want them to at least have a chance to get some praise, if for nothing else than doing it, because it's not always easy to do the things that this community does with these. And so I have a little buffer, but for the most part, my community is good. They're good to each other is what it is. And I've really, it hasn't been hard to cultivate that. We all love these machines. We all love that we can have little arcades in our houses where we couldn't afford to do it 10 years ago, and just giving them that ability to do it. I'm running my mouth. We're up at the end of the time. I'm going to pop this up here. Thank you, Michelle, who said she loved the conversation. I can't come every Friday evening as I occasionally have a social life. Yes, we know. So Michelle is over in good old England, and it is Friday night there. So she's usually, I think she jokingly said that she'd be a pint or two in by now to me once when we were on a call.
Honestly, so that sounds exactly like the material that should put her on this stage.
Yeah.
Oh, well,
yeah, we could do like a happy hour.
Could you imagine that? Just her just slamming the beer and going, you know what I think about discontent?
I don't think she'd have a southern accent. I don't think she'd have a southern accent, though.
Oh, was that southern? I don't really know what it was. I was just thinking, what would a D&D bar kind of sound like?
I have the pleasure of working with a gentleman that is in England, and he sounds like a BBC announcer. And when I listen to him, I'm like, could you just read a book so I could fall asleep? I mean, he has the perfect accent. London British accent, not East Side. What is it? Not West End, Easton, or maybe West End, not East End. I don't know London, but it's not Cockney. It's very proper, what I would say proper English. We have so many dialects in America that I can't really pick on any one dialect in England, because we have some that are bad too.
Oh yeah.
So, but
if you go to Swarm and you do a drunk presentation, I will absolutely pay the $2,400 to be at Swarm to watch you do that. Hands down.
That's hilarious. That is absolutely hilarious.
Just like that, I missed out on Swarm's scholarship.
Aww.
Why would you want to come to Swarm? To watch Michelle drunk enunciate everything.
Received pronunciation. Is that what it's called, Michelle? Then I'm not familiar. So yeah, we have like a couple of dialects of Southern. There's jokingly, there's redneck, there's hick, there's a couple of them. Texas is a whole dialect of its own. My mother-in-law is from a place in Florida called Okeechobee, and I like to say there's an Okeechobee accent. Because my wife will go, what used to be my wife, she lives with us now, but my wife would go visit her mom in Okeechobee, and she'd come back with a Southern accent because everybody talked like that. All right. So we are way over. We're like 4 minutes over. So please, Jillian, tell us again who you are and where people can reach out to you if they want to talk about their moderation troubles in communities.
Yeah, of course. So Jillian Benbow on the screen at Jillian Benbow on Twitter. I'm still there for now. LinkedIn, I'm more and more active on. I think it's just Jill Benbow. You'll find me. And yeah, I work for SBI Media, the Community Experience podcast. You can hear me every Tuesday talking to someone about community. Yeah, Twitter and LinkedIn are probably the best ways if you just need to talk about someone in your community doing something crazy. I got you.
Penny, please go.
Yeah, so mine's going to be a little bit special because I just launched a video on my YouTube channel, which was about all things open, which David and I got to meet at. And while I was there, I actually won a Raspberry Pi, which I am raffling off. So the easiest way for you to contact me, wink, wink, is to go to YouTube, wink, wink, and watch that video, wink, wink, to win a Raspberry Pi. Just saying.
Yeah. So I as a coming from a community of arcade machine enthusiasts who love those Raspberry Pis because they take out the guts that are in the machine now and put in a Raspberry Pi to make it bigger. Those things are rare and expensive right now. I don't know. Was it a 4? It was a Raspberry Pi 4.
Yeah, it was a Raspberry Pi 4.
Okay,
and
so that's the new one.
Keyboard variant.
Yes. So they're hard to find right now.
Yeah,
they are
so
hard to find.
You should share
right.
it with your Reddit community.
I will.
Hey,
they won't care about
wink,
the community management side of it because they get tired of me talking about it. But
oh yeah, but just subscribe, leave the comment, get the Raspberry Pi.
That's right.
Wow.
Please like and subscribe if you're on YouTube.
Like, subscribe, and ring that bell because
That's right. So I want to thank you both for joining me today. And normally I would thank Tim, but he's not here. He's with his grandkids, and bless him for that. Please like and subscribe wherever you are watching this. If you would like to be a guest on an upcoming episode, or you have a topic you would like to discuss, please head over to communitymanager.live. It's our website. And at the bottom of the page on the right-hand side, there's a little button that says contact us. Hit that. There's a form you can fill out and send it right to us. We also do this as a podcast. As I said earlier, you can find that everywhere that you can get your podcast. Thank you again to Vinia and Jillian for joining me. And we'll see you guys next week, where I won't be here, but Tim will. And we're going to be looking back in time at just what 22 was about and what it was like. So take everybody. See you next week.